Hey guys, my name is Attorney Walter Knott. Sorry for being in kind of a darker room, but I am currently on vacation right now in Maine, around the Bar Harbor area, specifically around Mount Desert Island. But I just wanted to let you know that these 3 days I'm going to be up here and we are going to be doing these videos live because it's just easier for me to go ahead and shoot them live as opposed to editing. Now, let's go into the important things. Before we go into the presidential details of this video, I need you to understand a couple of things very important. Number one, the Social Security 2100 Act was just re-released by essentially, a group of congressmen. And as a result of that, I will be going through that to find out how they've changed it, what they've done, etc. So the Social Security SS 2100 Act has been re-released. We expected it on October 20th. They knew they were going to be late. 2 days ago, I released a video on it. They just released it today. So over the next couple of days, I'll put together a script. I've got to read through the bill, and then I'll basically give you exactly what that act, the SS 2100 Act, does. Remember, that whole act, the whole purpose of that act is to fund the Social Security trust funds until 2100. And the bottom line is that by 2100, most disabling, factors within a human being will have the medical technology to cure most problems, from headaches to fibromyalgia to surgeries that would fix most back problems, neurological issues, etc. So, howdy guys, how we doing? Howdy, howdy. So, I am doing great today. I'm on vacation up in Maine. So, what we're going to be doing is going through some of the things. Yeah, indeed. We're going to be going through some of the basic things that you need to know about a president who would essentially support Social Security disability benefits for the retired, for the disabled, including those on supplemental security income. So there are a couple of things that you want to look for when basically looking for a president that supports these things. Number one, and I'm going to use the current president as an example. Obviously, he's the one that's in office. He's the good hypothetical. Number one, you want to look for somebody who campaigns on significantly the idea of raising the benefits for those on Social Security, reducing the penalties, increasing COLA options for them, etc. That's the main thing. But the problem you run into is that a lot of these politicians have a tendency to go ahead and promise things and then not deliver. So, what you're looking for from a president is that they're going to promise these things with a timetable attached. I want to go through that again, with a timetable attached. What do I mean by a timetable attached to their promises as they become president or in the process of them becoming president? That they'll promise within the next 8 months, they'll promise within the next 6 months, they'll promise within the next 12 months that they will pass some version of this bill. Now, obviously, a lot of those promises are going to be hard to keep because we have a two-party system and we have a House and we have a Senate. And if you don't have the House and the Senate, you really can't make promises about pushing things through. Unless you can show support, sponsors and co-sponsors, on those bills that you want passed through. So let's go through this real quick. There are two main biggies on the disabled side of things, and also the retired. Social Security 2100 Act, Supplemental Security Income Act. There are other ones too that are put together by organizations, and they're cute. They take little pieces from each one, and they're good, but they're not the two main ones: Social Security 2100 Act and Supplemental Security Income Act. Now the other channels, the B2B, the LA Elite, all of those, they come out with any little thing that and what we see is this: the young freshman Democrat based, senators, House reps will come out with all of these bill ideas that they want to go with. A lot of them do not have any reality to them. Some of them have no way for them to be paid for. I don't cover those anymore. There's no point. There's no point. They're not going to be passed. They're not even going to make it through the first committee. There's no point. So I'm not going to waste your time with that stuff. There's two main acts that matter: Social Security 2100 Act, Supplemental Security Income Restoration Act. All right. Both are based on the following. When these things were passed, there has not been an increase in benefits to match essentially where they should be nowadays in today's currency, what it would be against the modern dollar. And the whole idea behind that is essentially, okay, cool. If we don't know, essentially where they're at, we have to first figure out where they should be going, and then we have to figure out how we're going to fund it, and then we have to figure out how we're going to basically set up everybody on these programs to receive the higher amount. This has all been figured out. This has all been figured out years and years and years ago. Some of these things, the original ideas before they were called that for those acts, go back to 2010. So an example of a problem that we're seeing with the current president is that President Biden is essentially creating this identity where, people are, putting it very simply, following exactly what he wants to magically happen. But he's not doing things that are consistently expected with an individual that really wants these to pass. Now, I know politicians, especially the ones that have been there in there a long time, they blame everybody. They blame, everybody for their problems. They blame private organizations. They blame other politicians of opposing parties or politicians in their own party. But the reality is, the politicians that have been there for at least 25 years plus, you can only blame them. They are the most knowledgeable on how the system works. They should have tried many, many times over to go ahead and pass these things. So if we look at the current president, we know he did not support Social Security benefits way back in the day. We now know that a major aspect of his whole plan to become president was to push the Social Security agenda, reducing fines, increasing benefits, even creating an entirely new group of benefits for those who are basically taking care of the elders and the disabled children and things like that. That doesn't exist currently in the current formulaic way that they were looking to do it this time. I mean, we have payees, but it wasn't like that. So what's happening is we had a president that promised things, and now we're starting to hear the promise of, well, we'll look into it next year. 2022 will be the year for these things. So here's what I think is going to happen with this whole, um, essentially presidential capacity thing for people to understand what president would be good for this. You're looking for a president that makes promises, gives you a timeline, and within the first year of becoming president, starts talking to senators, starts talking to House reps, and starts, giving statements to the news. We are not seeing statements to the news. We are not seeing statements to the House reps, statements to the senators at all pertaining to these Social Security benefits. In fact, we have to learn about them through the websites, essentially, or congress.gov from these senators and House reps. And that's a problem because that shows that the president does not have this as a main focus on what's on his plate. And remember, this was one of the major things to be pushed to pass as he became president. Now, you guys are all in a tough spot. You're in a really tough spot. And the reason you're in a tough spot is that if you vote Democrat, you know that basically they're following the plan that they have, but they're not actually passing it, which is useless. And if you vote Republican, you essentially have somebody who doesn't really support Social Security benefits in the current form that it's in and will overhaul it completely and make it harder for people to get disability benefits, will be kicking people off with more CDRs, etc. So you have one group that can't come through on their promises and one that will make promises to make it harder to be found disabled. If there were a way to magically make President Biden go ahead and keep his promises and put them at the forefront of what he's trying to do, excellent. If there a way to make the prior president go ahead and realize that the American people need Social Security benefits and that the main functional aspect of them, being Americans is tied to their ability to be able to live, even though they can't work. If we could somehow just convince the super wealthy that the disabled are not just horrible, evil things, but rather humans of society, that would be a main stage step. And I think a lot of that is tying through the idea, because remember, wealthy people, when they get their retirement check, to them it's like whatever, it's not much. If they're getting a couple of grand out of that, 2, 3 grand out of that, they're like whatever, I don't really care. Because at the end of the day, they have investments, other companies that keep pulling in more cash. So I started to think about that, and there was an individual. I'm not going to say her name, but she sent me this email, and it outlined basically celebrities who support the disabled. It outlined all these things that could be used to understand investments. And I asked her to come on the show on Thursday to basically talk about how we could get people that are wealthy to relook at the investment in the disabled. It's kind of like a tough argument of trying to convince people that there should be some sort of formulaic Medicare for all. Everybody argues that there's not enough money. And then I sit back and I look at some of the financials pertaining to it, and I realize if we're able to mega fund all these other countries, then why aren't we able to take care of our Americans? And that's obviously, they'll say, oh, well, they're payoffs, or, oh, well, we need, war-based machines there, we need some sort of base there, or whatever. But at some point, you got to understand, don't these other countries have the capacity to at least defend themselves slightly without America constantly coming in with trillion-dollar military equipment over the years, just built up and built up and built up to, help democracy save itself? I mean, is, Russia and China, is the communist environment that strong to constantly be able to take out all the little democracies out there? Then you have to wonder, why are some of the other superpowers all based on this authoritarian communism based, single leader platform? It's interesting. It's interesting. Why have they been so successful? And then the reality is, if you look back through history, when you have one leader, things consistently tend to get done based on that leader's design and or desires. There's not a lot of gridlock. There's not a lot of things like that. The suffering of the people obviously goes way up, and that's what we try to create with democracy. But the happiness of the people when it goes up with democracy is also highly inefficient for an actual society to produce things. The happier the people are, the less sweatshops and slave shops and things like that you have. Whereas in China, they have a Holocaust going right now against some of the basic individuals that are there, that are basic to the land, and then they also have essentially a design system to create little mechanized humans to fill their society with building of corporations and products that they can go ahead and sell to other countries. So I guess what happens is this, I guess my big thing is this. Howdy, Kathy Fenton, Nanny Anderson from Solid Paul. Howdy, howdy, Phil B. Howdy, howdy. Ivor Brad, howdy. Michael Hauk, howdy. I guess what I'm starting to see is this. We need to look at these promises that the presidents are making and start to see what timelines they have. So back in the day, they had a guy, Winston Churchill. If you get a chance, go look at some of his speeches. And here's why. He would give these speeches that were not Americanized speeches. They were nothing like American speeches. American speeches are designed to sell people on generalized ideas, and they're not high level thinking, analysis, logic based. They are low level thinking, analysis, logic based. They're kind of like selling things to people without actually having to tell people how it's going to be done. But if you go look at the speeches of Winston Churchill, they're like, at this time, I'm meeting with this minister to do this. We'll accomplish this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. It's a bullet point checklist of the timeline of how it will be done. Think about that for a moment. Over there, they have the politicians where they have to get it done by this amount of time, and what's their plan? At least they did when Winston Churchill was in. Vis-a-vis what we have in America, which is big fluffy ideas and they feel good. So what I think I started to realize was that I think what I realized is that we need to go ahead and start to look at which politicians have a history of supporting these bills. And then we need to start looking at what is the potential for those individuals to become more senior, either in the Senate or the House, or even be put up for president. Another thing that you need to look for is essentially the historical ties in their family to why they would support the disabled. Anybody can say that they support somebody, but if there's not somebody, if there's not a historical reason in their lifeline as to why they support it, their mother died from cancer, or their father had some sort of degenerative disc disease, or a VA problem where there was a chemical applied, or, they're retired and they can't afford whatever they need. If there's not something in the familial past, their family, then we have an issue because there's no real thing tying them to essentially do the thing that we want them to do, which is to have a heart for the disabled and the retired to have enough to be able to live on it and do well. I always get sold on this idea that the retirement benefits were essentially created, right, as a portion of what you're supposed to retire with. But we know now that that is 100% BS, because if retirement benefits were only meant to be a part of what somebody actually retires with, then why are Social Security disability insurance benefits so equivalent to that? So we can expect a disabled person who can't work to work on a portion of what they're supposed to retire on. Another example of why we know that's total BS is that most people, when this program was created, essentially, let's call it like it is. A lot of women had to go onto it who hadn't worked, and they were getting screwed out of the program. So it was just left up to the men to mostly collect through that retirement program. There wasn't enough money to go ahead and do things. A lot of these people were dirt poor. So the problem we're seeing is that this whole idea that this retirement program, these Social Security disability insurance, they're just meant to be a part of the actual retirement. It's BS. It's all BS. It's sold to the person to say, well, you know what? You didn't achieve enough in your life, and you didn't do this and that and should have and therefore and could have. It makes it seem like the less intelligent, basically a person is less intelligent, less capable because they didn't achieve more in America. But we know now that the greatest thieves in America are our politicians. And we know now as well that basically the people selling the identity that the disabled are this, useless, time wasting, horrible, whatever. We know now that those are also the individuals who basically, see no value to them. Here's the problem that I pose to you. Insurance exists. It exists all over the world. When you go to the big cities and you look at the big buildings, right? You see banks, you see insurance companies. You might see like, the headquarters of some big company, but it's always banks, insurance companies. And the reason that is that, in my opinion, insurance companies know how to sell to people the potential of there being some sort of loss. I think we need to tap into the sales tactics that they use. I don't know how to do that. I haven't studied them. I don't know. I've never been in insurance. I just know this. My mom was one of the bell ringers for high executive females in insurance land, and she understands a little bit more. I'm going to catch up with her about it. But what they do is you, the person, you take your money that you have, right? And you slide it across the table to somebody with a piece of paper. And the piece of paper says, I promise to you, in these very limited circumstances, that if shit hits the fan, that we will cover you, maybe. Right? Right? Because there's all these factors that could potentially change that. They could find something that they don't like. Something could change after the fact of it occurring. You could make a statement that they record you with, and then boom, you don't get to have your insurance. So why the hell do people pay for it? Well, the federal government now requires people to get some sort of health insurance. Otherwise, they're going to get fined. And then they threw out the fine provision. So I guess the big question becomes, okay, how do we get people to understand that the disabled are not these useless creatures, that to some degree people are paying into this giant pot, right? These big trust funds in an in case situation. Let's take a young person, right? And then let's tie that to how we can get the president and see which presidents are going to be supportive of this, future presidents, because the ones we have currently are not in support of this at all. Not Clinton, not Bush's, not Obama, not Biden, not Trump, none of them. None of them are supportive of it. So the bottom line is this. If we look at this scenario, let's say we have a young person, a person that's 25, paying into the system, paying Social Security taxes, which are high enough, by the way. They shouldn't have to be raised to pay for more people. We just have to, as a country, invest money that's being spewed to the wrong things. But how do we convince a 25-year-old that there's the potential that A, they could become disabled in their lifetime, and B, they should have more benefits put aside for the retirement so that when they're retired, they live an okay life? How do we do that? How do we as a country slide this contract across? How do we have a president who knows how to slide that contract across that says, hey, we're going to cover you? Except the difference is, unlike STD benefits, LTD benefits, buying some sort of insurance policy that's going to pay you a good portion of your lost income if you were to lose, one of those spiels. How do we use these insurance systems to figure out essentially how to get a present to be able to sell to the American people, to invest into the retired and invest into the disabled? So I think the next thing that we have to talk about is basically uh, what insurance companies do. Insurance companies, to some degree, live in a fake world. They create a hypothetical world where you lose most things. And they sell to you the idea that, God forbid it would happen. God forbid it would happen that essentially you would, be going about your day. You get into a car accident. Your mortgage, you lose that. Your house, gone. Your job, can't do it anymore. How do we provide you with something to make it a smoother outro away from the life you used to have? Right? That's what they're selling you. They're selling you something extremely rare. It's a lot of money to pay every month. And at the end of the day, you'll probably pay in a lot of money and not get the benefit of it. That's interesting. That's interesting. So yeah, okay, so he's on record saying he wants to do it. I saw that in Annie Anderson. I've seen that specifically. I'm assuming you're talking about President Biden. He has been on the record throughout his career saying that he wants to end Social Security benefits, reduce Social Security benefits, And now he's on the record on the other side saying he wants to approve Social Security benefits. Now, if you go through and read specifically what he put on his pre-White House website, none of that was written by him. That's okay. That's how it works. They always do that. Somebody else writes the stuff for the president or the president to be. But what happened is there is no influence on behalf of Joseph Biden as to where he's going to be pushing it, when he's going to be pushing it. And he's got a problem. He either knows de facto that he's going to have the House and the Senate going into 2022, because otherwise he's got to push this stuff through. He's got to do it fast. We are about to go into November. Midterms are coming up. So he's either got to push through the things that he promised now or face a potential problem of losing the House or the Senate. If he loses either the House or the Senate, these are not going to go through. They're just not. They're not. Think about it. They could have gone through right now. He's got both the House and the Senate. He's got enough votes. He's got all that stuff. So we're faced with a problem. What do we do when we know that the president is not supporting the agenda that they said they would do, but now are not doing, and they face the potential of losing the ability to do it? There are three outcomes. Outcome number one, he keeps the House and the Senate, in which case he can pass it whenever the hell he wants, right? I mean, so long as 2024 goes his way or whatever, but he can pretty much pass it whenever he wants. Number two, he loses the Senate, which is the most likely one to be lost because it would only take one senator to flip the whole thing. In that case, none of these things are likely to go through. And that's because the current president and the current party, therefore, gets the benefit of people knowing that they would pass benefit increases for SSI, SSDI, and retired people. So the problem we then run into is hypo number three, which is he loses the House and he loses the Senate. I don't think that's going to happen because you got to get a lot of hands on board for this for the House to actually change. So I don't think that's going to happen for the Republicans. If it did, the focus is not going to be on the disabled. The focus is not going to be on the retired. The focus is going to be on how do they impeach Biden 1,000 times because that's what they did to Trump. And then we get into this one of these gigs. So I've been sitting here trying to figure out how do we make this chessboard work out for the disabled? How do we increase their benefits, decrease the penalties, increase their COLA benefit potential? How do we do it? We have to have lawmakers do it. They're the ones in charge. We have to have them support and get the news on board to actually push these things through. We have to have a president that wants to do things while he has all the power. So the only time I think this could actually happen is essentially between now and the midterm elections. That's it. I think, the loss of a potential senator is easy. I mean, that easily go to the Republican Party, which means that you've just made President Biden a lame duck. I think the hypothetical in the middle is the easiest one to play out. I think the House will stay Democrat. I think the Senate will go Republican. And I think at that point, President Biden will become a lame duck. And then he can blame the Republicans for not passing all the things that he promised to pass. So I'm frustrated. I don't know how to fix this. The chess game is a lose in most common situations. So yeah, think about that. Could he do an executive order? Sure. I mean, he would need Congress for Social Security disability insurance and retirement, but for SSI, he could do an executive order. So I guess what I'm looking at, guys, is this. The only way to really get this thing through is through creating that group where the disabled vote specifically for senators and House reps that push the agenda of disability. But then there's a problem, and I want to be very upfront with you guys about this. The problem is if the disabled and the retired, right, vote these other people in, there's a combination of Republicans, there's a combination of Democrats. We still have a two-party system, and the two-party system will not work together with either side because whoever gets these through and has that as the president right now gets the benefit of it, and then people support it. It's a lose-lose situation. So if you guys have any good ideas, essentially, about how we can get these politicians to not just vote for the SS Social Security 2100 Act and the SSI Restoration Act, but also to get them to give up this two-party, locked in, not going to change sides situation, then we're stuck. And we're stuck with the tough situation where these will not be voted in. The Democratic Party is not the answer. The Republican Party is not the answer. The two coming together with those people who support the disabled, that's the answer. There's not enough Republicans that are willing to support this. The Democrats that are willing to support this, there's not enough of them as well. The only way these will go through is pre-midterm, unless the midterms go Democrat like they did with the Senate. And the problem here, guys, is this. That's not to say that the Democrats are these, holy creatures that are amazing. That's purely to say they just have a one-party system at that point because it's Democrat House, Democrat Senate, Democrat President, which means that they can push bills through. Otherwise, it could just as easily be a different party, a totally new one. If you create a disabled party, it'll never get enough votes. It's not enough. If you include the retired with it, maybe. Maybe you'd have enough people to actually have a fight there. But then how do you convince all the retired disabled individuals to give up their Republican or the Democratic Party? I don't know. So, Kathy Fenton, bring it up by all means. Yeah, absolutely. Bring it up. Let me know what you think. Go ahead. So another thing that I want to go ahead and go through real quick is essentially what's going to be happening. Yeah, we definitely need more than the two parties we have. There's all these other countries out there, like for example, India, like for example, lots. Most political systems out there actually have more than two parties, and then they have to like come together on certain things to get enough votes to go through. But so Kathy Fenton, let me know what your idea is, and then we'll kind of talk about it shortly. And then I've got to switch over to another video. But I want you guys to understand what the next step is going to be. If we have a situation where the president starts coming out and saying to the news he supports the disabled and the retired getting a boost, things will happen. Whether or not it will pass will depend on whether it can pass before the midterms. So the problem we face is there's a clock. And I don't even think the nonprofit idea of getting the disabled to all vote in one direction is going to fix that situation. The threat of voting people out is good, but it's not a fix because if you vote people out, it still doesn't necessarily mean that you have enough people supporting it that are part of the midterm elections. So there's some problems here. Anyway, guys, I'm not seeing Kathy Fenton's comment. I hope you're writing it up. But the bottom line here is when it comes to picking future presidents that support the disabled, oh, there it is. I need to get permission first. It is an organization that maybe could mix with the get results there, the workforce fatalities. Yeah, I mean, go ahead, put it in there. Oh, okay, you need to get permission from that organization to post their information. That's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video, guys. I'll be doing another video in about 10 minutes. I'll catch you a little bit later. Yeah, we do need to get the money away from the politicians. That's for sure. Yeah, I'm in Maine. I'm basically at a hotel room, but I will catch you guys a little bit later. I'm on a little 3-day vacation. Have an absolutely wonderful day, and we'll go from there. Thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye.